Okay, here goes. So, recently I attended a play at the NGMA, and it was being performed by two very talented BLT actors. And in front of us, on a dari, there were these children and parents seated on the floor, and a few adults were seated at the back on chairs. And one particular child was somersaulting and running up to its mom with some excited finding with the other. And the mother was like, shh, like warning glance, I'll take you out. And then Vijay rose from his seat and he went up to the mother. And I thought he was going to, gently tell her to take the child out so they could start the performance. But that wasn't what Vijay did at all. What Vijay said is, ma'am, let your child be, let him do whatever he wants. These actors will know how to handle it. So, this remarkable ability, Vijay, on your part to inhabit the unexpected viewpoint, that of a somersaulting child, of a psychic construction worker, a steward at a club, or a police commissioner wrestling with his conscience. How do you display so many diverse characters with such depth and authenticity?
I guess it's the only honest answer is I don't know. But if I have to cook up an answer, I'll say it's a head full of memories that don't leave. So it's constantly falling back on life experiences. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, and Vijay has an encyclopedic memory, by the way. That's one of the other things. I think we should write a book about him, on the man who never forgets. So, Vijay is, I also went to this theatre workshop being conducted by Vijay at BIC. And one of the insights that really lingered with me was what he said about the training of actors. He said he doesn't ask them to memorize the script as a first step, but rather he tells them to inhabit the body of the character, to learn the gestures, facial expressions, and movements on stage. And he says once the body learns, the mind automatically follows. So these kinds of very deep behavioral insights into behavioral science and into the mechanics of theatre, they also run through your writing, through your stories and plays. And you just were telling me outside that you started writing late. How has your writing changed your theatre and management journeys, Vijay?
I see two questions there, not one. Yes, I did come into writing rather late in life. I was an actor before I became a director. I was a director before I became a designer. And I was all three before I started writing. And I'm pretty sure that being on stage and being a performer greatly influenced the writing. Because I found that when I'm writing, I'm constantly visualizing action. So I can't help it. It's part of that background.
Yeah.
I think your second question was about theatre and management. You and the audience may be surprised to know that there's a whole field developed in India called theatre in management. I find the bridge very natural. Management is doing drama all the time anyway. But we can help them do it in a more intelligent way. And that's what theatre and management is all about. Incidentally, there's a lot of good management in theatre. If you look at the histories of performing groups, as we have done as part of our strategic planning exercise, you'll find that the average age of a non-profit, non-commercial theatre group is 5 to 6 years. If our theatre company has crossed its diamond jubilee and is in its 64th year, we must have done something right. It's management. It's just good management.
In one of his stories, in his collections, it's a story titled The Offering. A madam goes into the kitchen and she's shocked because her Brahmin cook is smoking a cigarette in the kitchen. And she's shocked for two reasons. The first reason, of course, was that he's smoking and that he also filched the cigarette from last evening's party. But she's more shocked because he's bare chested and he's not wearing a thread. So she's not sure if he's a Brahmin at all. So, Vijay, you show us how, a lot of regressive attitudes and, the city in all its complicated layers, how casteism continues to persist along with Mercedes-Benz cars and BMWs and, marble mansions and so on. And you also start with like very small incidents, like this Brahmin cook smoking a cigarette in the kitchen, a maid flaunting a golden anklet, and they lead up to much larger consequences. So do you just let your stories unfold naturally, or do you have an outline and work backwards? I'm just curious about your process.
I'm told, I'm not an authority on this, but I'm told that there are basically two contrasting cognitive styles in writing. One is where a person cannot begin to write until the entire story outline is clear in the head. One has an outline, or one keeps putting down points and has a full story in outline first, and then the writing begins. The other is where you just have a central idea, one idea which grasps you, and then you dare to pick up a pen and start writing. And the story presents itself in your head. I think I belong to the second category. I don't have the full story in my mind when I write. I have a central idea. In the one you mentioned, the central idea is that a guy needs a job badly. He can get it only if, as a Maharaj, only if he's a Brahmin. So he says, I will condescend to even that. I'll be a Brahmin.
And, all his stories and plays, they're injected with a very deep humanistic vision, a universalist orientation, very reminiscent of, say, someone like Tagore. But there's also so much humor. They're so funny. Like, you really are like laughing out loud as you read them. There's this play called Sunday Brunch at the Gymkhana. And the very premise is very funny. There's this character, Ginny, who's trying to pass a resolution for women to enter the men's-only bar. And of course, the all-male executive committee just shoots down her resolution, and they actually want to expel her from the club. And there's this very funny exchange. I'm just going to ask Vijay to read it. It's between the steward and the secretary of the club. It's a very short excerpt. Just.
I have to tell you, this is completely unrehearsed. She chose not to share her excerpts with me until we are both on the dais. Muthu is the name of the steward, Mani is the executive secretary, and this is the excerpt she has chosen. It begins with Muthu. Club like own house backside, sir. You're here long time. Not as long as you, Muthu. How long have you been in the club? 15 years? 20 years? Oh, 25, 30 years. Don't know, sir. Don't remember. Maybe 35 years. I joined as tennis court boy when father was marker. Those days were good, no? Club members must have been real gentlemen in those days. Also good ladies, sir. Not like the Kachara people nowadays. All show outside, bloody city market mentality inside. What do you say, Muthu?
Well, I live problematically enough in the cantonment, but I hope I retain the bloody city market mentality inside. So, yeah. You also, you use all five senses to describe places. And but you also do it with a sense of mischief. You're always writing with like a twinkle in your eye. So there's this, you describe the smell of these people, migrants from a village who are joined a mall to work as salespersons at a mall. And just read this one line. Talking of which, all the staff smelt the same. The management had supplied them all with the same deodorant, both boys and girls. They were never ever to appear at the store without a generous spray of every corner of their anatomy. So you really show us, Vijay, how the city obliterates village smells, how upper class sensibilities are imposed on lower income people, as well as the homogenization that's ushered in by malls and spaces similar to that. How do you, and you travel in your stories, travel to so many settings like a Musafir Khana in Delhi, a paranormal lab in Hyderabad. So how do you remember so many details? Do you jot down notes? Are these all based on your own experiences?
I guess experiences can't be avoided. There may be something pathological about it that I can't forget things. In fact, one of the stories is about a guy who is cursed that he.
There's another story, The Tune Up, which talks about a migrant's journey from, and this is a typical aspect of Bangalore and many cities. You have kids coming in from villages and small towns to work in Swiggy or to work at a mall or as a waiter in a restaurant. And I just have one more excerpt, Vijay, if you're willing to read it, because this is about the training of these migrants in the village by their English teacher. It's so much fun directing, Vijay. Okay.
A big chance.
Yeah, my only chance. Okay.
The English teacher in the school had trained all the boys for facing interviews by people from the city. He got the boys to grasp the importance of keeping their heads up, not looking down at the interviewer's shoes, and answering questions boldly. The key answers to most questions were memorized. I am knowing. I am learning already. I'm doing like that only. I'm 100%. You won't believe it. This is the actual coaching that takes place for young people coming into the city for the retail boom jobs. Right? Talking of which, this particular story begins in a rural area near Metupalayam. It's called Kangayam.
Yeah.
Kangayam is famous for its oxen. Kangayam cows are very famous. But it's also famous for its ghee. And it is said that if you drive down that highway, when you get the smell of ghee, you're near Kangayam. It's very famous for its ghee. And I don't know if she meant it when she picked that up about senses. I find that I have a peculiar sense of smell. The olfactory sense is very strong in me. If there's a neuroscientist here, they'll tell you that it's an indication of brain damage.
Or a gift.
But I know that the olfactory sense, speaking as a clinical psychologist myself, the olfactory sense is the primary sense for infants. The knowledge of the world is through smell. But the human loses it very rapidly with the other senses developing. And by the time you're grown up, you've forgotten your olfactory sense entirely. It's only in COVID that you're told that if you can't smell, there's something wrong with you. But the olfactory sense is primary. Your strongest emotional memories come from a forgotten smell. You remember the smell of Lakshmi auntie. You remember the smell of Chamrajpet kitchen. It suddenly comes up. The smells are very important.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about your, olfactory sense being sharper than the others. But yeah, because that does come out in his writing. He does evoke the place, like you really feel like you're in those spaces. And there's a wide range of places that he describes in his writing. But in this same story, going back to the tune-up, Vijay, where, I mean, it's like that passage is, of course, it's funny, but it's also very poignant about the way these kids are being trained and trained as well to not be submissive, but they also have to be submissive enough to adapt to these jobs. But this character Murgesh has a very violent sort of fallout with his employer and returns to the village eventually, returns to the land. Are you trying to suggest, Vijay, that we should actively foster reverse migration and perhaps return to organic farming methods, because that's what this character sort of seems to be, ending with?
Maybe that's what it ended up saying, but I'm a bit careful about not having messages in the stories. It's the same thing with the plays. I don't like plays to give the audience a message. Then it's too much like a school teacher. I think we should accept readers and theater audiences to be intelligent enough, mature enough to find their own messages, to find their own meanings. And I'm a great believer in unanswered questions in the writing. We shouldn't answer all questions. It should be left to the reader. So I'm certainly not propagating returning to the roots or organic farming or anything like that. But it is a concern about a reverse that's taking place. For a long time, people were leaving the villages and coming to the cities. And in fact, it raised serious questions about the future of agriculture and the future of farming. But it took a few years, but now there is disenchantment with the city. The city is not giving the youth what they dreamt they would get. And so with broken hearts, some of them are returning to the village. And that's all the story shows and stops. Doesn't preach.
Yeah, in fact, in another story, I mean, I think you're very, you're careful about showing that you don't really support any movement that acquires a sort of evangelical fervor. There's a character, an infantryman who starts a movement to promote, I think, fitness and yoga, and he sort of starts feeling aghast when it starts acquiring a kind of zealous, jingoist kind of element to it. But yeah, definitely, I think your stories are provocative and they're unsettling and also, I mean, immensely funny. There's also this play Head Start, and you really are, you really show intergenerational chemistry with great deftness, Vijay. It's not just cliched acrimony or conflict, but it's that exasperated tolerance of each other that probably signifies these relationships in many of our houses. I was just wondering if you would read some of this excerpt. It's the last excerpt, I promise. But yeah.
This is from a play. It's one of my early plays. It's looking back on the mess we've made of our educational system. And the play has the experience of 3 generations within the same story play. The oldest generation has a father, Appa he's called, who didn't go to college. He started life early with a bag in his hand as a salesman and worked his way up the company ladder. But he hits a glass ceiling because by the time he's in his late 50s, facing retirement, you can't be a manager without an MBA. And the only 2 letters after his name are SC. Not what you think it is, but in those days, Senior Cambridge. The next generation has his son, whose one passion through his engineering studies is getting an admission in abroad in an American university, any university, as long as it's America. And he's hell bent on going there. His father doesn't know. And the next generation has two kids whose only preoccupation in life is homework and more homework and more homework. They've never seen play. So these three generations keep crisscrossing through the play. And in one scene, the second generation guy is suddenly becoming Indian because he wants to attend an Indian classical concert to impress his friends, particularly a girl. And he is learning to wear a dhoti to go to the concert. And the father enters and watches him struggling with a dhoti. And then he speaks up. He says, Appa speaks. The trick is to pull your tummy in just a little before fixing the right side. That's right. Now put a 10 paise coin there. Roll it. I can do it, Appa. I can do it. Don't wear it so low. It's not like your swim trunks. Above the paunch. Here. So it won't slip off with bending and stretching. The son is headed to a concert by Pandit Jasraj. Appa. Concert, dhoti kurta, new group, car. No motorbike tonight. Nice, nice. A tribute to Pandit Jasraj. I hope he sings well tonight. Sing? I thought he played the sitar. Maybe he does privately in his bath, but he's never made it known.
So, what is your view on the current state of intergenerational relationships? I know we can't paint anything with a broad brush, but how do you think the silver generation is being currently treated by the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas in your view?
You know, intergenerational friction has been there for generations. It's been there for hundreds of years. Plato writes about it, about how young people are growing their hair. Look at the way they're dressed. We've lost it all. What's our civilization coming to? That's Plato. I think friction across generations is natural. It's absolutely normal. I don't think we should allow it to bother us. Young people find a way, and so do the oldsters. They find a way of overcoming it. I think we should trust human intelligence, is that the word? To find a way.
Yeah. Okay, just segueing briefly into your theatre journey, Vijay, you've been associated with the BLT for more than 6 decades in various roles. What would you want from stakeholders in the city to support theatre and ensure that it flourishes?
We have to begin with what can be called the given condition. The given condition is not very happy. We are not a theatre society. In Indian society, theatre is a propped up art form, particularly in the cities, and particularly English language theatre. We are not a theatre society. We don't teach theatre in schools. It's not a curriculum subject. Unlike many societies that side, where it's part of your schooling, it's part of your growing up. It's as natural to you as singing in a choir. And if you step out of the house, there are 20 plays going on in the city. We are not a theatre society. It is an indulgence. It's in this context we have to think about revitalizing the theatre in this country. It's not enough to say that we had a glorious theatre tradition 300 years ago, before the British came. It's not enough to do that. We have to think of challenges today in educating audiences, in developing audiences, making it a part of our lives in schooling, and so on. And that's what my colleagues and friends in the academy part of BLT are trying to do.
Yeah. You've also been involved in education, as a founder of IAM-A, IAM-B, as a professor, and you've worked extensively with schools to bring theatre into schools. What kind of changes would you like to see broadly in education to ensure we spark the imagination of our little ones?
I think I know what needs to be done, but I don't think I know how it should be done. I know that what needs to be done is to restore the dignity of the arts, to restore the value for arts in our education. It's a society rushing headlong into an artless state. And we know that the best of the development of the mind comes from artistic sensibility. I know this has to be done, but I'm too small a guy to have policy solutions for it.
In fact, on a related note, in one of his stories called The Launch, the chief guest is the education minister. And the narrator is like, oh, it should have been the High Commissioner of Great Britain. But then he says, on the other hand, maybe the education minister will get educated. But of course, that doesn't happen because the minister shuffles out in the middle of the performance. But would you have any questions from the audience now? I think we have 5 minutes before we... Just one question? No? One question, yeah. Any audience questions?
Can I have the last word?
Sure, Vijay, yeah, please.
After them.
Yeah, you can go ahead, I think. Yeah, you had a question? Yeah.
After being kids on online so much, but youth and kids, somewhere I feel they're getting bored of it. So if you see a lot of live performances, comedy shows, stand-up shows, and people watching, say, some street plays. So I think there is more enthusiasm now to see live performances, shows. Maybe it's little bit it's increasing compared to watching everything on the small screen. So do you also see that, and do you see that that's going to grow in more in the days to come? Thank you.
Right.
It's good to end with that note of optimism. I just want to, and she's given me permission to have the last word. I want to end with by remembering a very close playwright friend of mine who's no more. He was part of the theatre movement in Britain, which revitalized the theatre in the 60s, along with Harold Pinter and Simpson and Mortimer and others. His name was David Campton. He became a good friend of BLT. And he's written a very beautiful book on becoming a playwright. I learned a few things from him about writing. But he makes it a very interesting point in the book. He says, this book can teach you how to be a good playwright. But I'm afraid it can't teach you how to be a successful playwright. Success in the arts today needs marketing savvy. It's not enough to have the content. Thank you very much.
Thank you.